do have one correction to make to the announcements while we're passing those out and kids are going out. The announcement said that the roster was ready today. It was ready, and then we discovered it had more errors that we didn't know it had, and so it'll be ready next week. So there isn't a roster after all. So let's pray real quick. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your word, and thank you for the stories that are in your word. Thank you for the lessons that are embedded in these stories about how you work and about how we are as people. And Lord, may we learn from the examples of other people so we can be more effective ourselves. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We are in Acts chapter 27. There are only 2 more chapters in the book of Acts. We're nearly there. I'm going to do the entire chapter again, and this is a long chapter, so it's going to take a little while. Fortunately, this story is not going to require a lot of explanation. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of add some commentary as we go to make sure we understand the story. It's a story about a shipwreck, so hopefully it won't be too boring. Now this first part, though, I have to tell you, from about verses 1 to 14, if you ever wanted to do a practical joke at church, here's what you do. You ask somebody if they're willing to read a Bible passage. And they'll go, yeah, I'll read that. Assign them Acts chapter 27, verses 1 through 14. There are more weird names in this section than any other portion of the Bible, I think. So as I'm reading this, and I stumble all over the names, I'm asking your forgiveness because these are some weird names. But that's what happens first. So, whoo! You have fun with this. So let's read Acts chapter 27. And when it was decided that we should sail for Italy. Oh, hold on, stop. I need you to understand. Paul's prisoner. And they've done the whole trial thing in Caesarea. He's in the custody of the Romans. They've decided to send him to Rome. And this is how he's going to get from Caesarea, which is in the region of Judea, to Rome, which is a ways away. Okay? So that's what's happened before this. And when it's decided, verse 1, that we should sail for Italy, they proceeded to deliver Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. This centurion, he's going to be in charge for the whole journey. Verse 2, in embarking in an Adramyttian ship, which was about to sail to the regions along the coast of Asia, we put out to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica. And the next day we put in at Sidon. And Julius treated Paul with consideration and allowed him to go to his friends and receive care. This tells us a little bit about this Julius guy, the centurion. He's not paranoid. Obviously, if he was paranoid, he'd be like, no, don't leave. He seems like a reasonable fellow. Paul is a prisoner, but he lets Paul go see some of his friends and be cared for. He seems like a reasonable guy. Verse 4, and from there we put out to sea and sailed into the shelter of Cyprus because the winds were contrary. And when we had sailed through the sea along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, then we landed in Myra at Lycia. And there the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy, and they put us aboard it. And when we had sailed slowly for many days and with difficulty had arrived to Cnidus, since the wind did not permit us to go further, we sailed under the shelter of Crete for Salmon. And with difficulty sailing past it, we came to a certain place called Fair Havens. I love that word because I can say Fair Havens. I just want you to know. All the rest of that stuff is weird. Fair Havens makes perfect sense to me. All right. Which was near the city of Lycia. And when considerable time had passed, and the voyage was now dangerous, since even the fast was already over, Paul began to admonish them. I need to make a quick stop there at verse 9. to understand, help you understand what that means. What does he mean that the time of the fast was already over? There was only one fast that was prescribed by Jewish law. It was with the Day of Atonement. If you want to go look that up, it's in Leviticus chapter 16, verses 29 through 34. It happens in early October. So by giving us that, he gives us a bit of a time stamp. The journey would have started in about August to September. He'd probably end up in Rome about March. So that's about the time frame. So a long time. Let's see. Also, though, for the readers, so if I said around here, I said, and it was about to become cyclone season, all of you would go, oh, yeah, I know what to look for. If you just mentioned we were going into cyclone season, I wonder if there's a cyclone in the story. By talking about the time, all the people of them would go, yeah, that's when all the storms come in the Mediterranean Sea in that region. It was a way of indicating that the season they were moving into was a stormy time. And they knew that. That was that time of year. So it gives anybody who was reading it in the time period kind of a feel of what the time of year it was. So that's what's happening in verse 9. And then Paul began to admonish them and said to them, men, I perceive that the voyage will certainly be attended with damage and great loss, not only of the cargo in the ship, but also of our lives. Just a second, a little addition here. For those of us who have heard the entire story so far, and we know what happens with Paul, and we know that when Paul talks, everything comes true that Paul says. All of us would hear that and go, and Paul just said, this is a bad idea, stop. Because we all know Paul. We all know how the story has gone. We all get it, that when Paul talks, you're hearing from God and you probably need to listen. Of course, the centurion doesn't know any of this. The centurion doesn't know any of this at all. So verse 11. But the centurion was more persuaded by the pilot and the captain of the ship than what was being said by Paul. This also makes a certain amount of sense, right? Who's Paul? Some sort of religious fanatic prisoner they're sending to Rome? I don't know. He's a tent maker, they said. What does he know about sailing? The captain and the pilot, who are professional sailors, say it's good to go. Let's go. Verse 12. And because the harbor was not suitable for wintering, the majority reached a decision to put out to sea from there. If somehow they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, facing southwest and northwest, and spend the winter there. And when a moderate south wind came up, supposing that they had gained their purpose, they weighed anchor, and they began sailing along Crete close inshore. But before very long, there rushed down from the land a violent wind called a Euroquillo. Where do they come up with these names? A Euroquillo. And when the ship was caught in it and could not face the wind, and we gave way to it and let ourselves be driven along. And running under the shelter of a small island called Clauda, not Claudia, Clauda, we were scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. And after they had hoisted it up, they used supporting cables and undergirding the ship. The best I can figure it, obviously they didn't have metal cables, they were running ropes somehow under the ship to pull it up to keep the bottom of the ship from breaking apart. That seems pretty radical. That sounds like, wow, things are getting bad. Okay. And fearing that they might run aground in the shallows of Syrtis, they let the sea anchor and so let themselves be driven along. And the next day, we were being violently storm-tossed. And they began to jettison the cargo. This is bad. Jettisoning the cargo is really bad. Why? I know that this might sound obvious to you, but we can skip past these things. This means there is no profit to the ship. You do not just send out the cargo lightheartedly. Oh, it seems things are going badly. Let's just toss the cargo over the side. No, that you are now this is a big donation. Everything that's happening in this trip will not pay. There will be no payoff at the end. You are not going to make any money. Someone just went broke. Someone's probably livelihood is gone forever. Someone's lost a fortune. The cargo has been dumped off the ship. That's serious. It means they are desperately afraid they're going to die, and they're making the choice between my fortune, everything I own, my ability to keep doing business for the rest of my life, and my own ability to keep living tomorrow. That's the urgency of we dump the cargo over the side of the ship. Don't miss how devastatingly difficult that would have been to make that decision. Verse 19, and on the third day they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. And since neither the sun nor the stars appeared for many days, and no small storm was assailing us from there on, all hope of our being saved was gradually abandoned. And when they had gone a long time without food, then Paul stood up in their midst and said, Men, you ought to have followed my advice, and not have set sail from Crete, and incurred this damage and loss. We haven't I told you so in the Bible? Right there. And yet now I urge you to keep up your courage, for there shall be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For this very night an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood before me, saying, Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all who are sailing with you. Therefore keep up your courage, men, for I believe God that it will turn out exactly as I have been told. But we must run aground on a certain island. But when the 14th night had come, we were being driven about in the Adriatic Sea about midnight, and the sailors began to surmise that they were approaching some land. And they took some soundings, and they found it to be 20 fathoms. And a little farther on, they took another sounding and found it to be 15 fathoms. It's getting shallower. That's good news. And fearing we might run aground somewhere on the rocks, they cast 4 anchors from the stern and wished for daybreak. And as the sailors were trying to escape from the ship and had let down the ship's boat into the sea on the pretense of intending to lay out anchors for the bow, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, Unless these men remain in the ship, you yourselves cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it fall away. And until the day was about to dawn, Paul was encouraging them all to take some food, saying, Today is the 14th day that you have been constantly watching and going without eating, having taken nothing. Therefore I encourage you to take some food, for this is for your preservation. For not a hair from your head of any of you shall perish. And having said this, he took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of all, and he broke it and began to eat. And all of them were encouraged, and they themselves took food. And all of us in the ship were 276 persons. And when they had eaten enough, they began to lighten the ship by throwing out the wheat into the sea. And when day came, they could not recognize the land, but they did observe a certain bay with a beach, and they resolved to drive the ship onto it if they could. Casting off the anchors, they left them in the sea, while at the same time they were loosening the ropes of the rudders and hoisting the foresail to the wind, and they were headed for the beach. Striking a reef where the 2 seas met, they ran the vessel aground, and the prow stuck fast and remained immovable. But the stern began to be broken up by the force of the waves. The ship is going down. And the soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, and so that none of them would swim away and escape. The prisoner that just saved your life, let's kill him so he doesn't get away. That's awesome. That's what they're saying. Verse 43, but the centurion, wanting to bring Paul safely through, kept them from their intention, and commanded that those who could swim should jump overboard first and get to land. and the rest should follow on planks, and others on various things from the ship. And thus it happened that they were all brought safely to land. What a story! What a story! It would make a great movie, wouldn't it? Sea and boat rocking, and people dying, and boat crashing, and actually no one dies. No, that's not true. There's no death in this. Certainly a lot of action. Lots of stuff going on. Embedded in the story, though, is also a lesson. When I grew up, we had something called object lessons. Did you guys ever have object lessons? Those of you who grew up in the church? You have somebody would go up and they'd have like a chemistry set or some little balls, and they'd do a little thing, and then from that they would tell a story. And then it wasn't that it was true because of the object lesson. The object lesson just gave us an opportunity to see what was true. This story is an epic object lesson. Absolutely massive. It's an object lesson of something that happens to all of us. A point of our life, a way that we go through, something that almost everybody at some point or another wrestles with. And it starts in verse 10. It starts in verse 10 with the centurion listening to two voices. Let's go back there. This is when Paul said, "Men, I perceive that the voyage will certainly be attended with damage and great loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives." There's Paul speaking. And ultimately, Paul is the voice of God. Now, the centurion doesn't know that much. Yeah, whatever, Paul, religious guy. But Paul's perceptions are from God. But the other thing that he has to choose from is the voice of reason and experience. The pilot and the captain. And the centurion has a choice. He has a choice to listen to the voice of God, which is that, or these people who have a certain amount of experience and understanding and skill. In that moment, he has to make a choice. People everywhere across the world have a similar choice. And oftentimes we reach this choice kind of in young adulthood. Like those of you who are teenagers or in your early 20s. And you might have grown up in the church, and you might have grown up with, these stories of stuff, but there's going to come a time when no matter what you've done, whether you've been baptized, whatever, you're going to end up making on a practical level a decision about who you're going to listen to. Maybe people have heard about the Bible. Maybe mom and dad believed it. But that doesn't mean that me as a person believes that God speaks through it. It's a Bible. It's a religious book. Like, there's the Quran, there's the Bible, and there's this thing, and there's that thing, and there's the writings of Buddha, whatever. Meanwhile, there's a panel of experts at our universities, our high school counselors, other people about our age that we think are really smart. And they're going to tell us the path to success. They're going to tell us where to go and how to do things based on experience and reason. We have a choice to make about paths to go. And frankly, even after way after I became an adult and I've been a Christian a long time, I've also been faced with the same question from time to time. Where am I going to put my trust? And in verse 11, the centurion makes the same move. He trusts the people who seem to have the most practical experience. And to be honest, most people do exactly that. most people in the world go with reason. It's not hard to understand that. Many of you who are Christians today can point back to a point in your life where that's exactly what you did. Now here's the thing. No matter who we listen to, whether we listen to the voice of God, or whether we listen to the voice of experts and reason and human understanding, the trials come. The storms come. The difficulties come. They always come. To everyone they come. It's what happens. Everybody's life meets disaster, tragedy, hurt, betrayal, pain. Every single life encounters it. It doesn't matter. Being a Christian doesn't save you from pain. It saves you from some pain, though. We'll get to that in a second. And something happens in verse 15 that I think this is an amazing description of what happens in our life when we're overwhelmed by our circumstances. Listen to this and tell me if you can't identify with this. And when the ship was caught in it, this violent wind from the north, and could not face the wind, we gave way to it and let ourselves be driven along. Isn't that an amazing picture of we're going along in our life and these things happen that are difficult. These things happen and it turns out to be too much. It's too much for us. It's beyond us. And at some point, we give way to it. It overpowers us. And we let ourselves be driven along by it. By this tragedy, or by this habit, or by this addiction, or by this thing, or by this toxic relationship, or whatever it is. And the wind turns to be too strong. And we're fighting for a while, and then we just drift back. And we just get carried away along with it, and we're gone. What an amazing word picture of what happens to all of us in the face of our trials sometimes. At some point, every person learns the limits of human reasoning and skill. There's a limit. Doctors who are fantastic in their field and know more than anybody else as a doctor still have family members that die of cancer. Their knowledge and skill and wisdom has a limit. It runs out, and they cannot stop it. Nurses lose control of their lives and become addicted to the narcotics they dispense, even though they know better. Not all nurses, but it happens. Psychologists still have to face irreconcilable grief. Sometimes they even have mental breakdowns, even though they're the expert of mental health, yet they are still subject to what is beyond them, that they cannot stop, that they don't have an answer for. Professional money managers still go bankrupt. Successful celebrities commit suicide. For all of our amazing knowledge and skill, every single person learns eventually that it runs out, and we cannot face the wind, and we give way to it, and we let ourselves be driven along. And so we start our lives and we're young and we're teenagers or we're young adults and we're like, should I listen to God or should I listen to the reason of man? And this sounds really good. We start down that path and we're counting on the reason of man. But no matter who we are, the storms will come that prove that the reason of man is limited and cannot handle everything. It runs out. And if that's where we put our trust and our faith and our hope, every single person who finds out the limit of human understanding and exactly what it's capable of and what it's not capable of. I do want to make an aside though, in verse 17, and after they had hoisted it up, they used supporting cables to undergird the ship, and fearing that it might run aground, they let out the sea anchor and they do these things. Man, folks, verse 17 looks like some out-of-the-box thinking, let's figure out how to save the ship stuff of very skilled people. Just as an aside, I don't want you to think for a moment that I'm downplaying the value of human skill and effort. And quite frankly, without the effort of the sailors in the story, it seems clear everyone would have died. Somebody did do a lot of hard work. Someone really did use their head. And it isn't wrong for us to use the materials and the brains that God gave us to work with what we can. But they're only useful in a limited way. They cannot give us ultimate direction and they cannot give us ultimate hope. And this is where they fail. And they know they fail. They know they fail because they give up. And so they try, and they try, and they try, and they try with all the skill, and all the effort, and all the ingenuity, and all the outside-the-box thinking they can come up with. And it's noble, and it's great effort. And I applaud their attempt, and yet, it's not enough. In verse 18, we read about the cargo being tossed out. You know, Paul is about to say in a second, I gave you some advice, you didn't take it, you really should have. Regardless of why we make the decision to ignore God and follow the world's advice, there is always a cost. There is a cost to deciding, I think the world sounds just fine, thank you. I think this stuff over here sounds a little goofy. There's a cost. An earthly cost. There's a cost in our relationships. There's a cost in our health, our mental health, our spiritual health. There is a cost. Now, some people, especially ones that have grown up in church or they have some sort of understanding of God that's in the background maybe, and they see the cost coming. Here's what I've seen happen many times. It comes to me like this. Ooh, that looks like something I don't really want to deal with. Maybe if I turn to God right now, He'll save me from this storm that I can see in the distance. This is their plan, or this is what they come up with in the moment. Of course, the reason the storm in this particular case is coming in the distance is because they didn't listen to God in the first place. That's not always the case, but sometimes the reason for the storm, sometimes the reason for the cost, sometimes the reason for what we're going through is because we rebelled to begin with. And yet in our rebellion or in our mess, sometimes we go to God and say, God, I'll turn to you now, take away the consequences. Once in a while, God is gracious. But oftentimes we still get to bear the cost. And let me tell you what I've seen. I've had these conversations with people. This exact situation. They describe to me this mess in their life. And as I look at the story and I look at the mess, I go, okay, the reason you're in that mess is because you rebelled against the things you were taught, you acted immorally, you made poor decisions about stuff, but great. Okay, so you've got this mess in your life, and then they say something like this, and I tried God, and I still had this bad thing happen. So God had his chance, and he didn't come through for me, and so I'm not going to believe in God anymore. He had his one shot. Wow. So what you're telling me is that that's who you think God is. We talked last week about who is your God. So your God is like Superman, and he sits up in the sky, and no matter what I do and what mess I get myself in, I just get to, hey God, come fix my mess, and he's going to zoom in and fix it? Because I asked him to? Maybe God is gracious and he shows his power in saving us from the consequences of our sin. But what about when he says, you know what, it would be far better for you if I let you endure this consequence because I know you. You'll never remember to quit doing that if I bail you out this time. I bail you out this time, and you'll just go back to doing it again. You're going to have to suffer through the consequences of this, or you will never learn your lesson. God gets to make that call. He gets to decide, this time, you're going to have to live with the mess you started. But I'll be with you. But I'll be with you. But I'll hold your hand. But I'll give you support. But I'll love you, but I'll sustain you, but you're going to have to ride this out. Because you made a mess, you're going to have to live sometimes with the consequences. The earthly, I'm talking about earthly, not eternal. I'm not saying that eternally we bear the consequences of our sin. When Jesus pays the price for our sin, it is paid for eternally, flat out, forever. I'm talking about here on earth. On earth we make mistakes, and on earth we have to deal with the consequences of our mistakes. In verse 20, we see the end result, the path of trusting human resource and reason for the direction of our life. Verse 20, and since neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small storm was assailing us from then on, all hope of our being saved was gradually abandoned. All hope of being saved gradually abandoned. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been in your life in a place where you lost all hope of being saved? I'm in a mess. I don't know how to get out of it. I feel trapped. There's no way out of this trap. There's no way out. I've abandoned hope. This is it. I have felt that way. I have felt that way. And that's when God steps back in. Of course, sadly, because it doesn't have to be this way, this is where many of us have to get before we consider listening to God again. Sadly, we are perfectly willing to keep trying human reason and human direction and human understanding until we get to the very, very, very bottom. Before we're willing to go, all right, God, how about I've exhausted every other possible option. I guess I'm going to have to go with God. Like it's some sort of failure. Like, oh, I'm such a horrible, bad, useless person because I had to go to God for help. Why do we do that? Why do we drain every single possible choice of any kind, go into debt, get into physical problems, get into messes that we cause, do this whole thing, and until we're absolutely destitute, we won't even consider God as a choice. Why do we do that? So in verse 21, and when they had gone a long time without food, then Paul stood up in their midst and said, "Men, you ought to have ought to have followed my advice and not have set sail from Crete." Yes, that is correct. "And incurred this damage and loss." Yes, damage and loss could have been avoided if they had listened to the voice of God. "And yet now I urge you to keep your courage, for there shall be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship." And this is fantastic. And this time, everyone's willing to listen. See, they weren't ready to listen the first time. There was no crisis. It wasn't hard. There was no danger. But now, when all human reason has left the building, when it is clear that there is no chance for human effort, now when God says, "Okay, let's listen to me again," everyone's ready. If this is you right now, if this is you find yourself right now turning to God because all else has failed, don't go thinking you're somehow less worthy than everybody else. And I know some of your stories. It is fantastically common. It is our nature. It's what we do because we're prideful and stubborn and self-reliant little beings who don't like being told what to do. This is the common story. And if this is where you are, you're not any different than the rest of us. But God's message is always one of hope. Even death is not a problem God can't handle. See, that's a crazy thing about God's message. It has answers to the things that human reason and human thought and human effort simply can't even touch. In God's economy, tragedy can become beautiful. Pain can be redeemed. Even death is temporary. He provides hope, period. Without a limit, without any edges. It doesn't matter how dire the circumstance, how difficult it is, how much money is involved, how much pain is involved, what the disease is, what the pain is, what the relationship's like. It doesn't matter. God has hope enough for all of it. Long after all human reason has exhausted every resource and hope is nowhere to be found. Verse 30. We have an interesting thing happen that proves something interesting. As the sailors were trying to escape from the ship is breaking up. And they let down the ship's boat. So you've got the ship, and then you've got the little boat to go back and forth to the shore. You guys know more about that than I do, because I'm not a sailor, and most of you know about boats. Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men remain in the ship, you yourselves cannot be saved." Then the soldiers cut away the ropes from the ship's boat and let it fall away. What just happened? That boat, from all human reason, will look like your best chance to survive. Right? If the ship goes down, that little boat's what's next. That's what you're going to get on to try to live. That's human reason. Now, Paul is speaking, and he says something. Now, the question is, where is the faith of the sailors? Is it in themselves anymore, or is it in Paul? It's absolutely in Paul. Why? Because they go, right, if you said, get rid of the boat's gone. Cut the ropes, let the boat go, the little boat is gone. That doesn't make any sense. We were talking on Wednesday about the nature of true faith, or what God means by faith, or what by belief, when we say real belief. See, it'd be one thing for the sailors to say, sure, Paul, sure, we believe you, we believe you, we believe you, we believe you. But then if Paul said, cut the boat, they said, no. No. Look, that boat is the only way we're getting off the ship in one piece. We're not getting off the boat. You see, if they said that, they could say all they wanted that they believed what Paul said. The proof that they believed what Paul said is that they cut the boat free. The boat, that itself, was symbolic. Their action, their obedience was symbolic or proof that their faith was a trusting, believing faith. This is exactly what God asked for us. This is what he means by having a saving faith. It means that our faith, and what God tells us to do, that would cause us to take what we would normally put our confidence in, what we would normally put all of our trust in. I'm going to trust in this, I'm going to trust in this, this is good. And if God said, cut it free, we go, right, it's gone then. That demonstrates genuine faith. Genuine faith has its outcome in action. And so when we claim that our faith is in God, my 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 faith is in God, but then God says, do something, and we go, nah. No, I need that. No, I need some of that. No, I need that. What does that say about whether or not we really believe him or not? What does that say about whether our faith is actually in him or not? We can't go around claiming our faith is in God, and then when God asks us to do something, we completely ignore him and say, no, I gotta hold on to that. Well then, where's your faith? So in verse 32, the sailors do what they're asked, and they cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and they let it fall away. And their trust in what they think will work floats off. So here's the entire sequence. God spoke through Paul in the first place. No one listened to him. No faith. They did what they thought was best. And they had to jettison the cargo, and they got in huge trouble. Later, God speaks through Paul again, and people believe. What they do is a natural consequence of their belief. The outcome is that everyone is saved. That's the sequence of events of the story. The next 10 verses are more of the same. The next 10 verses is Paul saying what should happen and people doing it. People doing exactly what Paul says to do. Why? Because they believe God's speaking through Paul, and they believe that God has got this, and their faith in themselves has been, that was long gone. Their faith in themselves is long gone. This guy is speaking for God, and God's got the answers, and we're going to do exactly what he asks us to do. And then in verse 42, something really interesting happens. By verse 42, they've seen land, they've been given a plan, they can see it. People who can swim have jumped off, and they're swimming, and other people have got a plan. Right? I'm going to grab this wood, and you're going to grab that box, and we've got it. We can see it. We're going to go there. And now, they can see salvation. Verse 42. And the soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, and none of them would swim away and escape. As soon as the solution identifies itself, we're back to trusting our own judgment again. Isn't that just like our lives? I'm in trouble and I'm in crisis and I see the mess that I've got myself in and I cry out to God and I start to listen to Him and I'm still fighting through the chaos and the trouble because I didn't listen, and now we're getting through it and God's bringing me out of it and I'm seeing how it works, and then as soon as I start to see, oh, there's the end of the tunnel and oh, it's going to be good and oh, God has delivered me, oh, well then God, I don't need you anymore. I can handle it now, God. Thanks. I just needed you long enough to get me here. Now that we're here, I'm good. Why do we do that? Why do we do this? Why are we so eager to get back to us calling our own shots of how we should do our life? It's like we can't wait to tell God, oh great, God, so thanks, but I only needed you for that bit. Looks like we're good now. I can see the island. Thanks. It's tragic. So here's the application. In our story, God speaks through Paul. In our world right now, God speaks through the Bible, which, by the way, includes a lot of stuff that Paul said. God also speaks through pastors and teachers and Christian friends. The most intimate way that God speaks to us is through the Holy Spirit inside us. That's the most intimate way that God speaks to us. So how do we get there? How do we get to a place where we can hear God speaking either through His Word or through someone else or through the Holy Spirit in us? How do we get to a place where we're actually listening to the one voice that no matter how bad it gets, will always give us clear focus and direction and hope? Mostly that last bit, hope. Well, we have to believe in God and in Christ's work and what He did on the cross with the same kind of dependent faith as the sailors put in what Paul said. That same faith that the sailor said, Paul, if you say, cut the boat loose, and that's what we need to do, we will cut the boat loose. I'm not saying that our actions save us, by the way. I'm saying that the faith that would cause us to act is the level of faith required. A belief that places the fate of our lives in His hands. We recognize that we cannot save ourselves. In fact, we recognize that it's our refusal to listen to God that got us into this situation in the first place. Our errors, our sin. And we recognize that Jesus is both God and man, and that He paid the price for our mistakes, and that He died and that He rose again. And we acknowledge God's authority over our lives and of the world, and we proclaim it openly and willingly. It's a belief that will inevitably change what we do, and yet it is not what we do that saves us. It's God's grace alone that saves. I believe there's people in this room that are ready to do this. I believe you already know that God is real, and that you're already realizing that if God is real, then His word and His direction would have to be vitally important. There's no special ceremony, and there's no special magic, and there's no secret handshake. There's just you inside your heart acknowledging to God what is already true and giving Him the authority that He needs to save you. Your alternative is to keep fighting the wind on your own. But I have to tell you, all that happens, the best we do as humans, is we fight against that wind, and that wind overtakes us and eventually drags us along. going to have a life characterized by something different than that, it requires God. When I pray in just a moment, the question is will you believe? Not whether you will do a special thing or whether you'll walk an aisle or whether you'll do any of those things. The question is, do you believe? Will you make that internal commitment? And that can happen anytime. For the Christians in the room, I've got to ask you, are you still listening? Or do you do what I do? Because I'm not putting stuff on you that isn't on me. See, I am all too eager, as soon as God has delivered me, to go right back to trying to make it work on my own. I'm all too quick. All too quick that as soon as it's over, and as soon as I don't need God-sized power, then, okay, God, I'm back to me. I got it now. Thanks. Which all that does is lead me right back to the same crises and the same consequences that are indicative of where I go and what I do. Please understand that the storms don't stop because you're a Christian. What changes as a Christian is that we have a hope that's unsinkable. We have a hope that's unstoppable. We have a hope that continues even if the question is death itself. We still have hope. We have hope, period. It is different in quality and substance and power than a hope you can find anywhere else. And lastly, if you feel as if you understand God from the Bible, but you're having a hard time dealing with God on the inside, that the Holy Spirit is something that's not active in your life, would you please come talk to me about how do we encourage our relationship with the Holy Spirit? How do we work further and further from God simply being something academic that we read in the page? And how do we more and more understand God to be someone who's working inside of us? Changing us from within, empowering us from within. It's always easier to look at our neighbors and see how they're failing than to listen to God and ask ourselves the same questions. So here's the deal, don't worry about anybody else. And especially for those of you in the room that are teenagers or young adults, and you're looking at the direction of your life right now, and you're making choices now about who you're going to listen to, about how you're going to make your path. All of the human wisdom and culture and custom and understanding may sound really reasonable. But in the end, it always reaches its limit and can do no more. And I promise you, your life will go there. It will go there. It will go to a place where human reason and human understanding and human thinking worked and worked and worked, and now it works no more. It's done. It's reached the place it can help you, and it's gone. And if you don't have something else, you will not have anything. You will have your grief and your pain and your disappointment, your disillusionment, and hope will gradually be gone. I'm not telling you that the human skill is some sort of sin or something to be avoided. I admire the skill of the sailors that kept them alive. I'm saying that ultimate hope is still in God. Ultimate direction is still in God. Ultimate purpose is still here. And without this will fail. it will reach its limit and it will end. And I'm begging you, young people, to think about this as you craft these early parts of your life. 20, 21, 22. What am I doing? Who am I with? Who am I listening to? What wisdom am I listening to? What am I listening to that is the way to live? I beg you, think very hard. Because you will go down this way, and there will be a cost. You may not get relieved from the cost. If you are in the cost, if you are in the pain, God's still offering hope. Right now, God's offering hope. A hope that is not at all definable by human terms. A different level of hope. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we have a story here of men, skilled sailors, who lost all hope. The storms came and they tried and they used every limit of human understanding and effort, ingenuity, thinking out of the box. They tried it all. And in the end, all they could do was give in to the power of the storm and be dragged along. And gradually give up all hope. And God, we know, we can see, we can read the stories of people all through our community, all through our society who are experts and they are smart and they are successful and they are rich, and yet tragedy comes to them. Tragedy comes that they can't handle. Tragedy comes that crushes them. And you, God, are the hope that never fails. You, God, are the answer that is always there. You are the direction that never runs out. You don't have any limits where suddenly you don't have any more to give. It never ends with you. Never, ever, ever does our hope end in you. You can handle everything we can't. So, Lord, wherever we are in our journey this morning, would you cause us to put our dependence back on you where it belongs? That if you ask us to use skill and human understanding, we will, but our ultimate support and dependence is on your word, your face, your spirit, your message, your direction, your hope. Lord, I pray that someone in this room right now would just finally go, I get it. I get it that God is the one I have to depend on, and I throw myself on His mercy right now. I get it now. There's nothing more to think about. There's no other details I need to worry about, because God is there and He just wants me to throw me on His mercy, because my hope is gone. And I am in desperate need of something eternal and real and powerful. Would you help all of us to support each other? And instead of judging one another, would you help all of us to just push each other in that direction? Would you help us to all just hold each other up? Put your faith in God. Go back to the Word. Go back to what He said. Go back to His promises. We'll hold you up. We will pray with you. We will grieve with you. We will suffer with you. We will hold your hand. We will cry tears. But we will push you back to God every single time, because that is where our hope is from. Would you cause us to be people that just hold each other like that and pull each other in like that, and just we would have a tight bond of love that would not end. Because the storms come to all of us, and we need you. Because our understanding and our skill and our effort all eventually fail. Lord, we love you, and we depend on you. You are our hope.